But about 6 months in, I was really lonely, and I think it was sort of this second moment in my life where I realized how much kind of connection and people and sociality was important to me. The way I often frame it is I found myself realizing that I would go many, many days where the only people I would have a conversation with from 8 in the morning to 7 at night were the doormen in my building and people who were paying me to have a conversation with them.
Matt Lundquist didn't always want to be a psychotherapist. Initially, he saw himself as more of a philosopher and social justice advocate, someone working to make change in his community. But in doing that, he found a passion for clinical work. That's when he realized, wait a minute, I think I'm a therapist. Matt was offered a position of clinical director at a therapy organization, a role he admits was too fast, too soon. Despite the challenges and mistakes he made along the way, Matt gained invaluable experience that shaped how he approached his solo practice. He was relieved of the burdens of leadership, but soon found himself feeling lonely. When others expressed an interest in joining him, Matt saw an opportunity to build a community again, this time from the ground up. Today, Matt is the founder and clinical director of Tribeca Therapy in New York City. In this episode, we explore how his early leadership trials helped build a thriving people-first practice. Welcome to Radio Front Desk, a show that surfaces what real people and real clinics are doing to open, run, and grow successful health and wellness businesses. I'm your host, Denzil Ford, editor-in-chief of Front Desk magazine by Jane.app. Here, we have powerful conversations with health and wellness professionals on the business side of clinic life. We hear their stories and discover what works and how to do it. And we also talk about what doesn't work. If you want to check out more stories like this, head to frontdesk.jane.app. I feel like I love what you said about you're with people all day, but you're also kind of not with anyone. Yeah. Can you talk to me about how you built your community out of that experience and feeling like alone, but then like I need people that have like a two-way relationship with?
A lot of the answer to that, in terms of how we've built community as a group practice, I think there's sort of different levels of answer to that. I think the most important thing I might say is that I would give a lot of credit to the couple of people who were my first hires in a group practice. One of whom actually only recently left the practice after almost 12 years, another of whom is still with us and has worked with me for 12 and a half years now, who I think, like me, had a real hunger and appetite for community. And so we sort of took on this sort of fundamental problem. There's a sort of, the therapy has a kind of people problem in its business model, which is, how do we deal with the fact that we are, in order to be successful, we need to kind of sell our time, sell our hours, and yet find ways of connecting. And so that has meant prioritizing group supervision and recognizing that group supervision is both a good model for supervision, but also like a model for connection and community. I think it took us a while, but ultimately we figured out that we needed to all be on the hour and have, similar overlaps in our breaks, for example, so that there were just lots of natural organic opportunities to connect. I think, again, supervision and group supervision and team time is an important part of that. I think, as a business owner, you're always thinking about, in the back of your mind, if you're doing something that isn't something that you're billing for, it's hard not to kind of back of the napkin that and think about, I'm losing this amount of money. And so there's been lots of times over and over again as we've looked at prioritizing sort of non-clinical hours to connect and work on growing and developing in our work, to tolerate the fact that means that, we're going to make less money in that hour, but to trust that, in the quality of life and in certainly our development as therapists, that's likely going to be good for us. And I think that's been good for us as a practice. And even if it wasn't sort of measurable, even if I can't assign a positive cash value to that, it's recognizing also that that's important. And I want to be able to not just have a successful business, but to go to work and enjoy that and have people who enjoy that. We shut the practice down for a full day every 3 months or so. We have a staff day coming up next Thursday where we're spending a day. We all kind of dress down and do some work and do some learning and also do some playing and share a meal and kind of have fraternity and connection in those ways. So making it important is a big part of that. And also, by the way, I think hiring people for whom that's important, and so they're going to advocate for that and facilitate that, and they're going to leave their door open between sessions and make plans to hang out outside of work with friends and friends who they've made through work, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, that was going to be sort of my question, I think, leading into, let's talk about hiring, but let's start with, how do you get people on board with that kind of culture, I guess I'll say, is that related to how you hire people? That's my question.
Yeah. Yes. I think those things are very related. I think that question is sort of right on. I think probably the most important answer to that is that this is who we are, and we try to be very out and transparent about the fact that this is who we are. And so we try to find ways of conveying that in our recruiting materials and in our website, and certainly in the conversations we have in our hiring process, to try to make that obvious. And part of that is not just in the content of what we say to people, but also in the form. The medium is the message. We have as kind of the central part of our hiring process a group interview, and so people can really see that, and that interview happens in our group room, and we call it our group room, and people have an experience of like, oh, there's a group room here, and there's a familiarity that these people who are leading this, and a warmth that these two people have. These people clearly, have built some community with one another. And so I think that what we try to do in a lot of ways, and other aspects of our values as well, is to really kind of wear those values on our sleeves, and certainly community is one of them, so that there can be some self-selecting. And I think for people who want to be more reserved, or want to just kind of come to work and see patients and go, and where that's not a priority, I think they're going to see that that's a big priority for us, and that maybe this isn't the right fit, and to let kind of being transparent about who we are do some work for us in terms of filtering in both directions, kind of in and out. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hiring is something that I take very seriously personally. My team is very tight knit. We need to do things such as what you're talking about, or spend some really specific time together that is a little tilted in a special way. And so I was interested, when you were talking about the group interview, is there some sort of like structure to how you structure that? I don't think you need to like let us know what your questions are that you ask people, but what's the structure of that interview? How are you really trying to get at who's in front of you and deciding if they are truly their character is truly who they're coming across as in that interview?
Yeah, we do a group interview, and it's not what I imagine a traditional group interview is. It's not, hey, everybody go around and tell us, why you want to become a therapist and what your 3 core values are. It's really kind of an exercise, and we invite people to have 2 very different kinds of conversations. There's sort of a part 1 and a part 2 that are meant to kind of invite people to think differently and more deeply about some things that they've maybe grappled with in graduate school or in their career to date. And our objective in that is not to correct people at all. And it's really not even necessarily to say, oh, do these people have the right way of thinking about this or the right values? Because I think what we're really interested in is people who have some strong foundational skills and who are open to learning. And we're a place where we offer just tremendous opportunities to learn and grow. And so people can really grow with us. And so for us, what we're looking for is, are you a grower? And recognizing that, I think this is true in any meaningful work, but I think particularly for therapy, I often say we're not building widgets. We're not canning soup. We're doing something that's really personal and where we're bringing ourselves. And so when you're learning that, when you're being supervised in that work, a good amount of the kind of tough feedback that you might get, the things that a supervisor or a colleague might observe, is personal and uncomfortable. And so we try to create, I think well within the bounds of what's appropriate to an interview process, a space where we can invite people to think differently about things and to be uncomfortable, not to reveal that they have the right way of thinking about it or know how to do it. And we're also interested, in kind of what do people's defenses look like? How do people handle it when when somebody challenges them, maybe somebody else in the group says something that's challenging or disruptive of how they're thinking, do they have the ability to kind of struggle but hang in there? And does that feel like something that we
Yeah.
can work with? That's our goal in that structure. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. A question that I ask, I started doing this years ago and I kind of did it. I didn't know why, but I ask at the end, I say, if you could say that you're like any animal, what animal would you say that you're most like and why? And
Mm.
I just love hearing the answer that people come up with. But really what I'm testing for is, one, how do they respond to such a wonky question? And then
Yeah.
two, I want to know what happens when they try to find the answer. And you get to watch that in real time. You get to watch them
Yeah.
try to come up with a creative answer. It's one of the most revealing things, I think, in the entire interview that I take people through.
Yeah. Well, and what's great and what I do think is similar to how we think about this is the particular answer they come up with is interesting, but it doesn't really matter, right? You could say
No, it doesn't matter.
a penguin or a coyote. It's interesting. As therapists, we're always interested in those things, but the critical part is yeah, kind of how is their thinking and are they are they able to kind of be vulnerable in that, or if they're struggling with that,
Yeah.
like do they struggle in a way that feels like something, oh hey, you're struggling with that, but you're kind of talking about that and working through that with us. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I want to back up. You said that you happen to be really good at marketing. So let's dive into that a little bit. What did you do to start
Yeah.
marketing? And then what did you notice that makes you think you have some
Yeah.
sort of like
Yeah.
success at it?
Well, I think maybe the most fundamental skill, this is a bit of a boring answer, Denzil, but I think the most fundamental thing that I had working for me is that I'm like really good at following directions. And so early
Oh,
on, I
interesting.
thought this is great and fun, but what if I don't have enough people who want to work with me to kind of pay the rent here and take care of myself? And saying, I like this, I want to be able to do this. And so I guess I need to be able to market. And also, by the way, like, I want to also be able to do this with integrity. And I want to not make decisions that are compromised clinically just to hold on to somebody. I want to be able to make decisions
Mm,
that are, based on what I think is kind of right and good for the work. And so if I get to where I'm kind of desperate and worried about keeping my roster full, then I worry I'm going to, begin to make some more compromised decisions clinically. And I don't want to do that. And so I think, I just sort of talked to a lot of people early on, kind of anybody that I could. And I listened to podcasts, and I'm sure if this podcast existed, it would have been on my list. And, felt like, a useful website was an important thing to have, and something
yeah.
that was more than just a shingle. And talk to people about like, okay, well, I've got this website, but I'd like people to find my website and read my website. And
Yeah.
somebody said to me, listen, don't go down the rabbit hole of all that SEO stuff and paying for clicks and figuring out how to hack things, and write a lot of really good content that real people want to read and will read, that is an honest reflection of you. And I took that so seriously. And I spent nights and weekends. There was a coffee shop in the neighborhood that I just would camp out Saturday morning in the basement and write and write and write and write. I sort of basically thought of every topic I could think of about therapy and thought, well, what do I have to say about that? And put that on my website. And it turns out that was so much more successful than I bargained for. And I'm really proud of that. And I still will meet people who say, gosh, you must be an expert on SEO. And I know almost nothing about SEO. I just have continued to follow that piece of advice that I got, 14, 15 years ago. And I think I think it's worked out for me. And so that's one thing. I think the other thing that I've learned later, I think as we started to have some success, is to not be afraid to spend money on stuff like that. And so we still don't pay for clicks. I've never paid for clicks. We've got one advertisement in a local blog that's in the neighborhood where our practice is here in Tribeca, but otherwise have never paid for advertisements. But I have recognized again the value of writing. And so one of the things I did, I was lucky to find 7 years ago, a woman who's become my writing partner. She was a copywriter and was somebody who had done a lot of work, did a lot of work with artists on helping them write about their work, and kind of stumbled upon her, and we developed this kind of really wonderful partnership, which is, she does a lot of things for our practice now, but the core is, I'm sort of moving through the world and I have an idea for something I want to write, and I email her some garbled snippet, and usually within a couple of hours she'll respond and she'll say, oh, here's what's interesting about that, and here's 3 questions, and I'll respond to those questions, and she'll ask more questions, and then we'll have a piece, and she'll do some editing, and that's a big investment. I pay her well. I've wanted to hold on to that relationship. I think it's work that she also really enjoys, which is great, and has encouraged her to stick around. We've got, developed a nice close friendship as well, but kind of a willingness to invest the time and the money in that and in those kinds of things. We're doing an upgrade of our website, and that's really expensive, and I want to do that well, and that's a tool that our practice really depends on, and so we're spending money to do that right, and it's a lot of money. But I think that's another part of it, is kind of knowing the value of spending money in the right ways, but also knowing the value of not substituting money for like elbow grease, and putting in the time has been a big thing in that regard.
I think that's a really helpful tip for people, because there's so much noise out there about what marketing you should be doing, but there's also like what really works in what context. And your example of just sitting down and writing is an excellent one. It's also a classic example from content marketing of something that really, really works. And there's I think it's called River Pools and Spas, but they're like the quintessential example of how what you just said works so well. You just sit down and start answering real questions that real people have, and people will come, and you don't need to do too much more. It's a great strategy.
And we don't have filler. I don't think you could find a page on our website where we say like depression is hard and you should go to therapy for, we talk about, we have some basic kind of standing pages where we say some more general things, but it has a point of view. And, I had this moment early on, I think this kind of crisis in maybe my first year in solo private practice, where I was thinking, gosh, I'm a little weird in these ways, and I have some ideas that maybe aren't kind of the mainstream in the field, and should I like hold those back? And having this moment of like, no, I think I gotta. There's a ton of therapists out there. I want people who find me not just to find me, but to say like, oh, this guy's got something to say that resonates with me. And I'm in New York City. Like, there's options. Like, if somebody's going to pick me, and that also I think makes the work more meaningful, as you find people who really want to work with you. But I think have a point of view, even if that point of view feels maybe risky or controversial. And I try to take a position, and I've got now we've got other people on our team who are writing. Some of them are new to writing for us, and they send a thesis, and I say, okay, sure, but like a lot of people could write this. I want to see a version of this that only you can write. What do you think about this? What do you have to say that's unique and different here? And I think that matters. And so people reach out and say, yeah, I read this thing you wrote, and it really kind of made me think. And that's great. And I think that, I guess people seem to want to work with me and work with us, which is really nice.
Yeah, I love that. Do you give people any kind of a structure for how you want what they write to be created, or is it just more free form and people have enough writing skill from their background? How do you handle that?
It's so different. I used to think that all good therapists were good writers, and I've worked with some phenomenal therapists who weren't such good writers. I've known some good writers who weren't such good therapists. And so, I think there's a real mix, and also I've known a lot of people who are good writers, but they don't know they're good writers,
Yeah.
and that's been something we try to help with too. And so my writing partner Emily is a huge part of that, which is that she's got this real ability, and she's spent this time working with artists, and I don't think a lot of visual artists think of themselves and are so confident in the domain of writing. They've chosen, painting and those kind of media as their uh,
Right.
as their way of expressing themselves. And so she's got this ability to kind of connect with people who are maybe really nervous or not so confident, and say, don't worry about the syntax. Like we'll sort that part out. Well, that's easy. Like talk to me, and she gets people to kind of blabber. She'll say, write it badly, write it messy, just write it really fast, and they build a trust with her when they're doing this with me, that like we're going to help them find a kernel. And there's a real leap of faith in doing that and inviting somebody. And people know we're going to put this on the internet, and this is in a
Yeah.
professional location. This isn't just an update on Instagram. This is something that people are going to read, their patients are going to read. And so encouraging people to not worry about structure so much. But I ask people to be always thinking about writing. We try to create a culture where, we're having a conversation or a supervisory conversation. Obviously, we don't write directly about, the content of our therapy work, but where we say, ooh, that's interesting. You should write about that. Oh, I wouldn't think about that. That's interesting. To help people realize that a lot of what they maybe take for granted like has some value, and other people would want to read that.
Right. Right. So you've got this like engine that's going to bring some attention to your clinic. What
Yeah.
about how did you grow more like on the nuts and bolts side of like the business things? Were there things that you were doing? I mean, you hired and you got into this group practice situation,
Yeah.
but are there other things, other like really important mechanisms to your growth that you can think of?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so much of it was things I did without knowing what I was doing. And there were plenty of mistakes along the way. But also some things that like just really worked out. One of the things that is, I don't know if it's unique, but I've heard of very few practices who do this. We pay our therapists a full-time salary with paid time off and benefits. And I can't tell you how many therapists and group practice owners and just smart business people who aren't even in healthcare who've said, you got to not do that. You got to pay people fee for service. And the argument is there. You have a business slowdown, or somebody maybe is less successful at the work. It's less of an impact in terms of having to kind of cover somebody's salary. But ultimately, I think what we decided is we wanted to be able to say to people, listen, we're gonna pay you a salary, we're gonna pay you a competitive salary, we're gonna pay you a kind of on the high end of what somebody at your level might get elsewhere, and give you the things that you need to feel safe and secure in a job. And we're gonna let you build a practice not as so rapidly that you need to hurry do that in order to be able to pay rent and pay your bills. And also, like, we're gonna acknowledge that you're going to stumble along the way, and you're going to lose patients and not land some intakes. And that's okay. We're going to kind of make an investment in that. And that has been, I think, like central. I think there's been different times where for lots of reasons, I've been tempted to listen to the advice not to do that. And have held in there and done that. And I think that's been, really kind of right for us in the aggregate. There's all kinds of things. I think culture building and retaining employees, doing good supervision and growing as supervision, supporting building. I think a big part of what I've done was to kind of promote and empower people who've been with me since early on to take on more of a leadership role and manage some of the administrative parts of our practice, but also do more and more of the supervision and support their growth as supervisors, delegating and inviting people who aren't me to have some authority and say in things. I don't know. Happy to talk more about those things, but those are a couple things that come to mind.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder what you feel about digging into leadership a little bit. That's such a big topic, and I think it's also something that can be really pivotal inside of a clinic. And what type of leadership means something to you, and how do you grow that in yourself and then instill it in the people in your business?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that question a lot in anticipation of this. And I think, the word humility, which is so overused in this space, really comes to mind. And I do think is the best word and something that I really strive for and hope I've achieved in some ways. Um, but I think in the spirit of humility, I think to really acknowledge, um, we talk about people being natural leaders, but I would imagine that even natural leaders early on, when they're really leading in a professional capacity, stumble a lot. I think it just is the kind of thing that I think it's not possible to learn without some mistakes and some struggle. Um, and so, I think that there's these two things that I work really hard to keep in balance, which is on the one hand, inviting buy-in, on the one hand, being transparent. I think encouraging people to challenge decisions and to offer a counterpoint to that by way of getting shared input and helping people feel like they have a say in what we're doing, but in balance with recognizing that at the end of the day, I'm responsible for what we're doing. We're running a healthcare practice, and the decisions we make can have real consequences for people's lives, including sometimes quite severe consequences, and also can have consequences for the quality of work we do and have consequences for our business. And at the end of the day, if our business isn't successful, it impacts, potentially our ability to pay people a salary or to meet
Yeah.
raises and promotions or to even keep people employed and keep the practice open and pay for marketing, which keeps the practice open. And, as business owners, all of those things that we deal with, which are really real and we're never far, we never take those for granted because there's a lot of responsibility on us. And particularly when you're employing people and, you've got, employees and they're covering health insurance for their partners and kids and the kind of knock-on effect of keeping things running. And so again, in balance with that value of kind of transparency and buy-in and humility is also to recognize, like, at the end of the day, like I need to be prepared to just simply make a decision and to be in charge and to be able to say, gosh, it sounds like some folks are disappointed with this decision, but this is what we need to do. So I'm going to insist that we do it, whether that's a clinical decision or a business decision. And so I think early on, I think I probably leaned too heavily on the first of those and not enough on the second of those. And I think ultimately, tried to be too accommodating, even in situations where I think I needed to kind of take a firmer stance. And that blew up in my face as it does.
Yeah, I've had the same experience, and there's a confidence that you need underneath it to be able to really work with people and to do what you're saying, have humility and really listen to ideas, but then also having an instinct for when to play the I need to make this decision card. I think that's an interesting
Yeah.
skill to learn, a combination
Yeah.
of skills to learn
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, and people will be will be mad at you, and
Yeah.
sometimes you'll do that, and that will be the wrong decision, and that comes with its own
Yeah.
uh, problematic. But I think if you're living in avoidance of people being mad at you, or in avoidance of having your name on a decision that goes wrong,
Yeah.
ultimately, I think you're going to be too passive as a leader, and that's going to have just
Yeah.
probably a different kind of consequence, maybe a bit further down the line.
Yeah, I think what I try to achieve there is a trust. So the more we have an exchange where I'm actually not making decisions and I'm actually like hiring people who have incredible talent to do it on their own, the more when I have to play the card of, well, I need to make this decision,
Yeah,
there's a trust there where
yeah, yeah.
if I'm reading the situation right, and my
Mm-hmm.
whole team's going to be listening to this, so we'll see what they think. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like if I'm reading the situation right, they can tolerate it and they can pick themselves back up and keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think that's absolutely right, and I think part of it is sort of in the interplay between these two things, which is when I can defer to the team or to somebody that has a strong position on something. Um, I do when I try to take the space when I make a decision that I think is going to be tough to slow down and take people along with my reasoning when I can. You can't always for lots of reasons. But I think in doing that, I think it builds that trust so that when the other kind of decision is made where I say, actually, this is what I'm doing, and I actually can't necessarily take everybody through that or win everybody over to that. I think there's sort of a benefit of the doubt that's built hopefully there, and I think that's been more and more true for us in practice, where people are able to say, okay, I don't like this one, but you've been a straight shooter so far and kind of included us and allowed us to buy in on so many other things. All right, I'm going to go along with that. I trust that you're probably doing that for the right reason. That's a big deal. It's nice to have that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you measure success for your clinic?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's in a lot of ways. There's certain aspects of success that we've decided not to chase. I think one of the biggest ones is we, for most of our history, and we're so lucky to be in this position, we've had like a lot more demand than supply, to put it in business terms, which is we have had, plenty of months in the last 12 and a half years since we've been a group practice where we've turned away a lot of business while also having, people in our hiring inbox or who we've interviewed, who are, eager to work for us and but who aren't the right fit. And so we've consistently, really said what we're not interested in doing is hiring enough people to fill the spots that we need based on our demand, but rather hiring people who are good, who want to learn and grow, who share our values, um, and tolerating, kind of leaving money on the table, as people say. And
Right.
that was a struggle for a while, but I've made peace with that for quite some time now. And so, financial success, it's not to say that isn't important. And the bottom line, I think the fact that we've been able to sustain ourselves as a practice is important. And this is a business that's been, good for me and profitable for me and for some more senior therapists who share in the profits. And also we've consistently been a place, and this is one of the key parts of an answer to your question in terms of measuring it is, we're consistently able to give people raises that are very competitive. And then ultimately, at a certain point for a lot of our therapists, we're competing with them leaving and going into private practice. And so have been in a position to pay people, as well or better as they would likely make in private practice, and also have, community and all of the other kinds of benefits that they get from us. And that's a big part of how we measure success. Um, and I think probably the most important thing is, are the people who are doing the work as therapists, like, are they growing in their work? And you can see that, quantitatively, like, does it seem like the people who've come to work with them and receive therapy from them are sticking around? And qualitatively, does it seem like they're growing and getting better? And, so we see things, there's all of these different, kind of metrics that we synthesize, kind of formal, measurable, and informal. That to me is, I think, the most important thing. I think to do therapy really well is pretty rare, and I think it takes many years of really hard work and hard self work. And so, when I can kind of see somebody grow and look at somebody who a few years into this is really developing some mastery, that's pretty fantastic. So, that's probably at the core of that, even more than some of the kind of quantitative stuff, which we've been lucky to have a lot of success around.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you're thinking about this in such a people-centered way. I think from my understanding, it's definitely part of what's making your business sustainable across many aspects of what you're doing.
Yeah. There's definitely lots of ways in which we, quote, leave money on the table in the short term.
I love it. Well, I think we've covered so much today. So I want to thank you for being so open and
Yeah,
honest with your strategy, your approach, your
yeah,
feelings. I really appreciate it. This has been so great
yeah,
getting to know you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this was such a delightful conversation, and I was so looking forward to it, and I think this was kind of even more fun than I thought. I is something really really special about kind of you asking these questions, and obviously, it's clear you can relate to so much of what we're talking about, because I think you're asking the things that that's what I think about that question an awful lot. And grapple with and struggle with it. So just really thrilled to have been here. Thanks for the opportunity.